Roger will not be here. I just got that.
10 seconds.
Live. Meeting of the Planning Board, Borough of Somerville for January 22nd, 2025 will please come to order. This meeting is called to order pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Both adequate and electronic notice of this virtual meeting has been provided by way of publication in the Courier News on December 24th, 2024. In addition, notice of the meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside of the Borough Hall located at 25 West End Avenue, posted on the municipal website, provided it to the municipal clerk, and distributed to all persons, if any, requesting copies of same. This meeting is being recorded with both audio and video and may be rebroadcast. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the planning board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Roll call.
Andrea Dare. Here. Chris Addicks.
Here.
Art Akins is excused. Larry Cleveland.
Here.
Jason Kraska.
Here.
John Manilio.
Here.
Barry Van Horn is excused. Mayor Gallagher.
Here.
Councilmember Vroom is also excused. Chairperson Warner.
Here. Pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, approval, we can do these together, can't we? We don't have to separate, I don't think we have these out.
I wasn't here for December 11th.
That's okay. So approval for minutes for session December 11th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Chris Addicks.
Yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Yes.
Jason Kraska.
Yes.
John Manilio.
Yes.
Mayor Gallagher.
Yes.
Chairperson Warner.
Yes. And approval for the minutes for January 8th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Andrea Dare.
Yes.
Chris Addicks.
Yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Yes.
Jason Kraska.
Yes.
John Manilio.
Am I eligible? I wasn't here at the last meeting. No.
No. Mayor Gallagher.
Yes.
Chairperson Warner.
Yes. All right, so on to the discussion about electric charging stations and ordinance. I think everybody did get in their packets, they have the proposed addition to the borough ordinance for fire prevention, life safety. Comments, thoughts?
So,
That is his recommendations, that was about a year ago, that the fire marshal put that together.
Yeah,
can,
He's reached out to the Board of Engineers, which I think will be making comments. I also reached out to DCA and was dealing with Keith, who sent me a different contact. And I said, well, can we get some guidance on best practices? And I'm still waiting to hear back on that. So
Out of the
I don't have-
Division of Fire.
Yes, correct. And Keith, who was the former fire marshal, Fattinger, said if I don't get a response, to reach back to him. Just best practices, what I understand what the Oregon statute says you have to provide. Obviously, the board's looking for guidance where, if we have a structured deck, where to put it.
the only other thing that I think we had talked about was requiring them to have fire blankets on site.
Yeah, if you look at what the fire marshal has said, a lot of the stuff, I think, supersedes the UCC code. So obviously, the board, when it comes to variances, has exceeded the code for NFPA 13 sprinkler system. The justification is to grant the variance to heighten, is part of the justification. So I think some of the stuff that's in Robert Lynn's response can be used, but the stuff that's more stringent in the code would have to be on a site, case-by-case basis.
Well, yeah, because we had discussion. This is just I guess, a rough framework.
Yeah.
Because we had discussion about limiting it to top level, open. Or surface. Yeah.
Outside.
Correct. Yeah.
so I will say I did have a conversation with the county hazmat team on some concerns. And there is a larger concern about the amount of equipment that has to go up, and would that be able to make it to a top? the amount of equipment that has to go out because of the disposal and on the towing. I talked to Mike's Towing. He would have some concerns about, hey, if I have to go up there, depending on the way how the vehicle is and the condition of it, you know, you could have a condition where you don't have clearance to get it back down. So it is something to think about when you're trying to put it at the top of a deck. And it also, I did bring up, you know, when we are extinguishing or trying to extinguish, yes, the concept is if the pitch is if it's in the wrong spot at the top and their pitch is wrong, it is going right down your deck and all that is getting into it. So there were some concerns, you know, and then just as many concerns putting it inside the deck. You know, it depending on how it burns, right? It could, and where it's burning, it could immediately ignite something else, and then you also have a structural integrity issue. The question, and I didn't think about this, I know that this is mandated, right? We're kind of thinking of, all right, we're only talking about, well, we don't have to worry about some of the other decks, right? What I think we also need to think about, because on the newer decks, you could have a height where we could now put it, okay, maybe you can hit that because the height requirement is for access and ingress and egress of emergency vehicles. But we have some existing decks. And I think we do need to think about what if they want to put a charging station into an existing deck. So that, you know, to me also, I think we have to think of all that. I will say the fire marshals just had a meeting yesterday, and it is a topic of conversation because they're all trying to figure this out. So I think the more insight to your point of what people are thinking and what people are doing, they did all agree. I did sit in for a little while just to kind of hear. And they all kind of said the same thing. The laws kind of do this, and nobody's really addressing the big picture of that you really don't want them in there, but yet this one says you should, this one says this one says that, and there's pieces, even to the point, they're even more concerned, honestly, some of the municipalities more concerned, obviously, about the requirement of having it in the garages, because that's something that a lot of them, they just don't feel like that is a safe. So, again, I think I like the framework, but I think we still definitely need some more information. And, you know, right now, I think my personal opinion as safety of all residents and visitors to Somerville, I would, you know, see if we could figure out a way to get it external, you know, because I just don't see any safe way, in my opinion, of, based on everything we're seeing, being able to keep it in that deck somewhere, or even on the deck. Like, so let's just say the deck at the top is part of being in the deck.
Kevin, can you reach out to your administrator network and your clerk and/or your clerk network and see if anybody has enacted any ordinances at the local level regarding whether it's vehicle charging or even bicycle charging?
I actually did just a quick search to see if there was any recent ordinances. I had not, but I had not reached out to them directly,
Yeah.
so I will go
Yeah.
to that network.
Okay.
I think part of the problem with that, I'm finding, is that a lot of these laws and regulations they've been pieced, but they're all newer, right? So nobody knows what to
Yeah.
do. So maybe somebody did come up with some kind of template that we can follow.
And I think everybody's kind of waiting for the state because ultimately it's going to have to be a state level action.
And I did, the state will be, which one was it? I wrote it down. They will be this year adopting the, here it is. The 2024, the IUC, International. Yes, thank you. That one's the 2024, because right now they've only adopted to the 2019, and that's where it states that, that's why the parking garages were, the regular garages were, because that is where it states in there that you have to have it in your garages if it's one or two, you know, based on. So that is getting adopted, and so to your point, they are waiting for the state on some of the stuff because they're not sure when that comes, and are there going to be other changes that they're going to adopt in the meantime.
So a lot of our neighboring towns, like say Downbrook, they're building all these buildings there. They had a fire in those buildings they built. They must have some kind of
Is
structure.
your microphone on?
Excuse me. Towns like Boundbrook or Bridgewater, like either they're not looking at it or they think they're covered.
No, they are looking at it. There's just nothing to prevent it right now. There's no ordinances, so. I think that's what
Can't even-
the mayor was getting to, is that there's,
Just with, talking with Kevin and just seeing what they're trying to do, that's about as good as we can get.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess the rub really is, and that's what the fact finding is, that the statute says that you have to provide this for new parkings, but no one seems to fully address the safety aspects on where, that's what I'm looking for.
What's
best
appropriate
practices.
to have provided.
What's the best practices? If you have a 5-story deck, where should these go? Great, the statute says you have to put it in the deck, where?
Mike, can you check with Bobby Lynn, the fire official, and find out, I'm assuming there's also a fire officials network statewide,
I'll get with Bob.
and see if he can tap into that as well. This shouldn't be,
No, and he was just at the meeting
not the
yesterday,
first.
so it came up, so he has those contacts.
yeah.
This is probably a dumb question, but why can't just EVs be mandated to just have outside surface parking? And
That
not
may
have
be
to worry
ultimately-
about
well, that's what we have to
going
go through.
inside At all,
That's
just
what I would like to
completely
see.
outside.
Well, that's
If
what
you, if
Jason
you have
was
an
saying.
EV,
Yeah.
all your
that's-
surface, if you have to provide so much parking, then provide enough outside surface parking
Right.
for your EV, so you're not worried about putting it inside and potentially causing
That's-
more of a safety hazard, like Lisa said, if it catches fire on the top and the emergency vehicles can't get up there, or they have a problem coming down, and then if the fire slides or the liquid slides downhill, then you risk damaging other cars and whatnot. Why can't, I mean, so we have to wait for everybody to come on board to see that that would be the most logical?
I think part of that was, in our discussion last meeting, was that the IBC currently in 2021 edition requires it under, what is that, 48,000 square feet. So there is a requirement somewhere that says you have to have it. And we're looking at, well, does that mean it has to be in the actual structure, or can we say as a borough,
Yeah.
we get it, you have to have them, but we want it external to them?
Yeah, it said parking facility, I think, was the
Yeah.
language it used, so what does that mean? Does it have to be in the deck? And then I guess the second part of that is just availability of land. So if you're gonna do a deck, you're gonna have enough to meet the state requirements for the number in an alternative, adjacent piece of property. I mean, it's not our problem, it's the developer's problem, but, it ultimately affects development overall. And what I found interesting too is, the reference in the fire marshal's letter that, not even the NFPA has standards for sprinklering of these things. I mean, it's so disjointed.
It is.
They have to do something.
Well, the other rub is, with the new codes requiring sprinklers, the sprinklers don't, in my opinion, adequately address a fire.
Not this kind of fire, not this kind of fire.
90% of the time, the sprinklers will protect the structure, that's the whole intent. But this burns so hot that the sprinklers, in my opinion, are
And if you look at it, the sprinkler from the NFPA came out in '23. If you look at it, there wasn't even enough data by then. A lot of it has really come up, in my opinion, you've seen it a lot in the last 18 months to 2 years is when you're seeing more and more of them. So that's part of the problem is something new comes out, right? And you have to kind of wait and see, right? And we've seen that, but now the laws are 2-3 years old or a year old, and now that we have more data to really kind of say, hey, this is something we probably don't want to do, the laws are now, they're now already antiquated or weren't addressed properly in the first place. Because the thought process was, way back, is you just pour water on it, right? Rich, we just pour water on it. But unfortunately, with this one, there ain't enough water that you're gonna get on that
Right.
thing.
Mike, are there ADA requirements regarding charging stations?
yes.
So how does that then interplay with what we're looking at doing by restricting in a deck? Where now are we gonna clash now with ADA?
The Board of Adjustment has dealt with this, and you have to provide ADA EV charging stations, and you can't double them up using the ADA for the federal code, because you have to placard the EV space that says, no parking for non-EVs, only
Well,
charging.
But the EV space, the ADA space, doesn't that have to be in a certain proximity to the door?
Well, the statute doesn't say that, but the federal regulations do.
So we're gonna run into an issue.
You run into an
Yeah.
issue because we're running into now that right now, one space in 25, you need a van accessible. So you have 25 parking lot or less, you need one van accessible. Well, with the EV mandate, you end up with 2 van accessibles because of this New Jersey statute that says you can't double them up because you have to sign them that says EV only. So we're running into that situation where
Yeah.
you end up with 2 van accessibles when the federal code requires 1 because of the state statute.
Right.
And there's just, it's black and white. It says what the penalties are and what the signage has to be, and
Well, my concern is the conflict between the two. Is it going to force us to have an EV charger in the deck or in a deck in order to be compliant with ADA standards?
Because it's closest.
Because it's closest to
Wherever, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all they're designed though. If we say it has to be outside, then they still have to make that work. They push the deck back or.
Yeah. It's just something to be
Again,
aware of.
it's not-
As we go through
I don't
this,
think
it's
there's
something to
an
be
easy
aware of.
fix.
Yeah.
What about the growth issue? Like, the mandate of they have to build out the gate with a certain amount and then have preparations for the next couple of years to expand it. That's also a question for us because, okay,
Oh, yeah.
5 spots outside outside the deck, that's great. Now they need 10. Where are they gonna put these extra
Yeah.
5? They can't put them inside if we're saying no. So it does clash with that.
Yeah.
Or at least it could compound over the years.
So it's something we have to, when you're speaking with Bobby or or even the administrators, it's something to be aware of that inherently there's going to be conflicts. How do we deal with it?
All right, lot coverage. So I think everybody has it in their packet. The subcommittee met. Do you guys want to go over what your recommendations to date were?
That'd be great. The subcommittee met via Zoom. I guess it was last Wednesday. And we burned through for an hour I call it the low-hanging fruit. And what came up was decks. That was one of the items. So what you see in front of you is a recommendation to amend the land use ordinance to basically allow the first 100 square feet of the deck to be exempt from the improvement coverage. And then any decks over 100 square feet, you count as 50%. Now, the caveat for that was, how do we address stormwater management? And if you have a deck, and there was no definition of a deck in the land use ordinance, because there was never a need before. It was all improvement coverage. It didn't matter whether it was a patio or a deck. So the definition, the proposed definition here is right out of the UCC. So it mirrors what the Uniform Construction Code is saying what a deck is. And there's a spacing between the boards so that runoff infiltrates between the boards, so it's uniform, as opposed to a sheet flow to one point, which may cause a problem on an adjoining property. The idea is, you have fiberglass decks, you have solid surfaces. If you had a huge solid surface that was pitched away from the house, you could pitch it all to one side and cause a stormwater runoff problem. So this language defines what a deck is and says you gotta have the gap between the boards, so you hopefully get uniform dispersion of the runoff on the deck down as opposed to a point discharge.
Can I ask a question? It's maybe a stupid question, but I've been known for worse. 100 square feet and then over that 50%, why?
The idea was, okay,
Why not just say decks, period? I guess that's what my question is. Why do we need to also, over 100 square feet, go to 50%?
Yeah, so I could talk about the rationale that we talked about. So originally, we talked about do decks count as impervious because the water could go through and go into the ground. And we said yes and no because, typically if you have a lawn area, all the water goes into the ground. With a deck, you're not going to have lawn underneath the deck surface. It's probably going to be bare soil or gravel. So that's why we came up with that 50% number. Because we said, it's going to infiltrate some of the water, but not all the water is going to go as if it was grass. And then there was discussion, do we limit how much of the deck can be built? And there's other, zoning controls. There's setbacks requirements. And one thought was not to count decks at all and just keep that as 0% improvement coverage. But then my worry is, what's stopping somebody from putting a deck in their whole backyard as long as it's within their setbacks? So we kind of want to give a little.
That I understand, yeah. I think,
And the 100 was just arbitrary. We threw out some numbers, 100 square feet, 200 square feet. I think the thought was 100 is, it's a decent size. It's 10 by 10. You could put a patio set out there. It's not huge. And then anything after that, then that would count as 50%. So I'm not sure if that kind of
Right.
answers your.
And right
question.
now, the ordinance allows, okay, depending on the zone district you're in, it's between 30 and 50% improvement coverage for the R3, R1 to POR, R2, R3. But it varies from 35 to 50% improvement coverage. But there's a caveat right now, it allows you additional 5% if you handle stormwater management. So this just loosens it up to address the deck situation to allow more flexibility. So you do have an extra 5% on top of 35 to 50% on the zone, and then this allows additional 50% for.
yeah, I was just wondering what the rationale is, where we came up with 100, and then, why not just the whole thing? And I do understand, listen, you can't just do your whole backyard.
Yeah,
Maybe-
yeah, I get that.
So maybe, is there another way of restricting? I'm just throwing it out there, because we're gonna get one bite at this apple, right? And,
Chair, the philosophy was, I was on that committee, sorry not Mike, but the philosophy was that we went under the condition that the entire goal here was to allow people to improve their properties without causing other issues, right? So the 100 square feet did come about basically by a visual of my property, right? So you can get a 6-foot table with chairs around it and still have the walkability around that. And that's the 10 by 10, right? Now, that, we did talk about could it be bigger? And then we got into that discussion, well, 100 square feet is reasonable in Somerville, that people could make that improvement on their property without having any ill effect on the lot coverage. And a patio that size is fairly customary if you look at, that type of table. It's not a big event type of thing. The number was arbitrary, but if the board felt the number should be higher or lower, the only thing about lower is then you really cannot,
Yeah.
you get a cafe table out there, right? So it would have to be a little higher, but then we got into discussion about what's that number? And the 100 feet just seemed like a reasonable number for not only, for someone to kind of fit that into, but if it had to be a little larger, it could be.
And then what's the control to make sure the decks don't get too big? Is that a good question, or did I miss something?
That's a good question. So I think there's a couple controls. There's the setback, so decks, if they're attached to the dwelling, is considered part of the structure. So that's one. 2, we're still counting decks over 100 square feet for 50%, so they still have to comply with the improvement coverage. So that's why we kept it at 50% and not, free will as far as how much deck you could build. And we kind of went back and forth with the deck as well. I've dealt with many municipalities. Some of them don't count decks at all, some count 50%, and some of them are 100%. And we thought 50 was a fair number, so.
I mean, the one approach is to sneak up on it. The zoning officer keeps track of all the zoning approvals. If this is becoming a problem, the board we could look at this down the line and say 100's not working, it should be 200. If there's very little action, and then it seems to be working. It's a question of.
so I guess my only concern with the 100, and I think Kevin kind of addressed that, making sure that we are looking at the town as a whole, and any home can somewhat put on a deck relevant to the size of their home, like not taking the whole backyard, to your point, no matter who that is, and not be penalized for it. That's really that's what I was thinking, is so where did the 100, square feet? And, I know that on average, there are probably some homes that you could probably go a little over the 100 square feet and it's relevant to their home. Not a lot in Somerville, but they might already have decks, right? So, but that's really why I was asking, because I want to make sure we don't now start penalizing somebody because they have a different size home than, other people within town. That's really why I was asking it.
This ordinance, by the way, what I like to do with this ordinance is if the planning board said we got one shot at this. There's gonna be multiple shots.
I know.
Because there's other issues in that ordinance that we wanna tackle.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, I think from the board's perspective, you said act quickly. So the goal would be to get this, at least this portion to the council as early as possible. And then we could, you know, as Mike said, we pulled off the low hanging fruit. The other ones are gonna take a little debate on and probably debate at this table. So, you know, so there'll be another crack at this. So even if 100 square feet, after a while, we start getting calls saying, well, I can't fit a barbecue grill on there, I need 120. That can be adjusted, because I think you're gonna see this ordinance in front of you more than once in this calendar year.
As a whole, you're saying, I get it, yeah.
So let me bounce something against the wall on this. Part of the challenge is we're going right back into the one-size-fits-all program. So we have lots that are 50 by 100, and we have lots that are 200 by 250, and everything in between. So as a percentage, you're looking at a lot that is 50 by 100, and you're potentially creating impervious coverage that is huge on that lot. And vice versa on the 200 by 150 lot, it's minuscule and it means nothing. Would it make sense, and I'm going to look at Mike because he's got that mathematical head, to do it as a percentage of either a ratio to the square footage of the house, the footprint of the house, not the house itself, but the footprint of the house, so that it then, because somebody talked before about being proportional, so that you're not covering your entire backyard. Does it make more sense to be proportional to the lot and to the home on the lot?
I think you already have that, because if you have that bigger lot, that 50% you're allowed to go up to, instead of being, you know, if you have that 20-foot by 50-foot lot and you're gonna put a 10 by 10, you're a lot closer to that 50% impervious coverage already. So now we're excluding that, where if you have a 200 by 250, and you wanna put a 100, a 500 square foot, you'll still be under that 50%, so this wouldn't even affect you anyway. I think, correct? Am I correct there, Mike?
Yes, it's, like the POR, I do believe is 50% improvement coverage. You're allowed to develop property
Up to the
50%,
50%.
which is, and actually it's 55% if you're allowed without a board approval to go an extra 5% if you deal with my office and you deal with the stormwater management, which is a fancy way of saying get the stormwater to the street. So it's not impacting the adjacent property. That's the big, the issue that's really the concern, that's why we stayed with decks, is not to address stormwater runoff. We're trying to not cause a problem on any other adjoining properties. And when you have a large surface area, you can cause a problem. So that's why the deck surface, defining a deck and trying to keep the slats, back to what John says, we're trying to balance the issue of allowing flexibility, but yet not impact the neighbor's property. And I think Jason has a point, being if the lot is big, Mayor, you do have proportionally allowed more improvement coverage.
I get
with
it.
a bigger lot.
I get it.
So you kind of have that built in. The concern is, and I think Kevin can say this, we've had issues where, just the way it is, that residents pave parking areas, and now we have complaints of stormwater runoff. It happened on a minor subdivision that we were dealing with last year. It's just becoming an issue, because when you're dealing with a lot of improvement coverage on small lots, you have to, in my opinion, be very careful, because all the subdivisions this comes up.
I get it. No, it's good, good.
I think to Kevin's point, it's an awesome start, I mean, and if we do need to re-examine it, because we do get some people that are like, hey, he just did it, and now all of a sudden this, and, and I think that can be addressed pretty easily. And it does open it up where at least they have up to that 100 square feet, and really I think it does,
And I asked the zoning officer to keep an eye on this, to track it for the board's use. How many zoning permits are being issued for decks? Is it a problem? Is this, so we have this information, as Kevin says, later in the year, is is it reasonable? Maybe we
It's not
can-
gonna come to this board, it's gonna go to the Board of Adjustment.
Right, so we'll know from the.
We'll know.
Zoning, because you need a zoning permit.
Just for clarification, I do a 100 square foot, I'm good. If I do a 200 square foot, I'm getting, I don't wanna say charged, but it'd be 50 square feet is what would be
Correct.
applicable.
Right.
Yep.
Of that 200, right?
Right.
Okay, it's not 50% of the whole thing,
No.
just 50% of the
first-
above 100.
The first 100 square feet is exempt.
Yeah.
It's a
Then
gimme.
you start the calculation on the 50%. So I'm hoping that the zoning officer will tabulate this on all zoning. 'Cause I think what the board is basically saying is we're looking for flexibility in residential zones. Well, I think it'd be great if you had all the zoning permits in the last couple of years, so you could see what are residents getting zoning permits for, right? And so we can use that and
Well, and now that this isn't a deterrent, right? That hopefully we can start to see that and collect that data, because this was,
And
somewhat
if-
of a deterrent for some.
If they're
Yeah.
getting permits, because you have a lot of people that are going out there and
Most people, I'll be
building their
honest with you,
decks, they're building
there's a
their
lot of
decks,
people that don't
and
know you
unless you
even
have-
need a permit for
Right,
that.
they're building their decks, and unless you get a neighbor that's pissed at you, you don't know about it. And if that neighbor gets upset and decides to make a phone call, then you go, oh, they built a deck and you
Yeah.
weren't supposed to. So you probably have people out there that have decks that, that are there.
Yeah. As far as sending it up to council, I would prefer to have a number of items rather than just do them as onesies.
I think we wait at least
Yeah.
another couple
Yeah.
recommendations.
Because as you start to get into those other issues, I'd rather bring them
And I
a
think
few at one time.
some of the other things, which I'm gonna get into next, of the next things that I think we should kind of look at, could also affect to the point of what's under your deck. So,
So when you say multiple, do you mean like decks and pools? Because we also net on pools.
Yeah.
Decks, pools, gravel driveways.
Yeah,
Yeah,
um,
I
We-
do
we,
think that, I mean, and not to cut you off, Mayor, but, some of these areas are very actionable, and very easy. I think gravel and pavement and those types of things are going to have a significant, may have a significant debate here, just on a committee, it may have a debate, but, our charge is to bring it back to here, we're just making a recommendation. I would urge that because people are gonna start coming into permits. right?
Yeah, I agree.
For decks and pools. I don't necessarily know, and they are, I mean, it's the time of year where they're designing it and they're building it. And I would just hope that those two items can kind of move together. And then the more difficult items, which will take some time, could linger behind, which will also give us some time to identify if there's issues with the other ordinances. And I recognize you don't want to hear this all year long.
Yeah.
But I do think there are folks that, once the council approves it, now granted, the council approving it will not get approved till end of March.
Right.
Right? So, because it's gotta go to the council, it's gotta come back to you, and this goes back to them. You're talking March, maybe April, before those ordinances are in play.
Well, let's at least get pools.
Okay, well,
The-
we have a
Yeah.
recommendation for folks.
Yeah,
That one's
I should have
under-
mentioned pools. I've thrown out to the committee that right now the pool surface is counted as improvement
I don't-
coverage. And in a pool, you typically have a freeboard, let's say 6 inches. So you're not gonna have runoff from a full surface unless it fills up, and then runs off. So
we got worse problems if that
we have
happens.
worse problems.
Sorry.
John pointed out to me that
The brook's gonna be.
it's not gonna be a 100-year storm is 8 inches, so you're not gonna accommodate a 100-year storm, you're gonna have runoff from a pool, okay. But should that be the litmus test for requiring improvement coverage? I think it's a little too conservative. I think the surface of a pool on a 10-year storm, a 20-year, 50-year storm, is not gonna have runoff. So that's why pools are in here, clarifying that the surface areas of a pool does not count as improvement coverage, solely because I don't think,
I'm good with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? So we're just trying to, more flexibility again. Right now, it's counted. With this, it wouldn't be counted. There is, we could have a situation where we cause adverse runoff, but it's gonna be,
If we have that much rain, the runoff's there anyway.
The brook's gonna be in your pool. so
That's
you
what I said,
can't
we
do
have
the
far
other way.
worse problems.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna have a swimming pool.
So is the idea with the deck, the 100 square feet, is that it's gonna pitch into the pool? Is that why you're
It's
saying?
two separate subjects, but the pool,
Well, it says
You can't-
the
I
deck
brought
around,
up-
the deck around the pool.
Yeah,
the
we
deck
talked
around the
about
pool
that.
counts, I'm talking about the pool surface. The surface of the pool itself, if you have a pool that's 30,000 gallons, whatever that surface area doesn't count.
So if you have a deck around the pool,
coping
the standard decking,
improvements around the pool would count.
yeah.
So,
And,
Just the water
That's where the
surface.
deck
Yeah, doesn't-
qualifications come in.
If you put a deck around it, obviously you can have
Okay.
more flexibility, and then literally.
I'm thinking like an in-ground
came out-
pool if you have,
If you look at the improvement coverage and you're gonna do some kind of grass with gravel matrix, in theory, and John brought this up, the grass doesn't count, right? It's only the gravel, it's not improvement coverage. So you're doing some kind of mix with vegetation, with grass, with stone, or some kind of weave. Technically, that grass portion is not improvement coverage under the current definition.
so, yeah, I guess my confusion was in the second paragraph here, because where it talks about the pool, it says, the surface area of the pool is exempt, I like that. And then it says, and 100 square feet of deck. When I'm thinking of a pool deck, I'm thinking there's an in-ground pool and you have that concrete right around it.
Yeah,
So maybe we just, for the language push, but it's being treated the same as below.
Yeah.
If it's slatted, good, but if it's solid surface, it counts.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
if we make it two separate sentences, because I think
Yeah.
that's what the intention was, talk about a pool and talk about a deck. And a deck would be whether it's a deck around the pool, whether it's a deck that has
Yeah,
your
we can
backyard
clarify.
table, whatever the case may be.
And just so my opinion, the board knows that if we need definitions, because we're calling decks out separately, that we use the UCC deck.
Yeah.
So that we're dovetailing, so there's no,
It's a standard definition that everybody.
correct.
yeah.
So that definition is right out of the UCC book.
Any other comments on pools or decks?
So, obviously, the board's gonna get this again, because the council has to put it into an
Yeah.
introduced ordinance, which would be likely, the second meeting of February, probably that'd be the introduction, maybe. I have to look at the timeline, and then it'll come back to you for literally, half of February and the beginning of March, hopefully to be adopted by the first meeting of March, possibly, and to be in effect, 10 days
Yeah.
after that, whatever it may be.
Yeah, for the,
Or I should say,
for the spring season.
is that in chapter 1 too?
Yes.
So then it's gotta go to the county as well,
Yeah.
for their filing, and then it'll
Yeah.
be effective after that.
Okay. All right.
I'm fine.
Yeah, that works. So
Do we have to vote on this, though?
make a motion to send it up to council?
You're gonna see it again,
So-
right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, well,
Yeah, so just so it's official. So a motion to send it up to council?
Second?
Andrea Dare,
Yes.
Chris Addicks,
Yes.
Larry Cleveland,
Yes.
Jason Kraska,
Yes.
John Manilio,
Yes.
Mayor Gallagher.
Yes.
Chairperson Warner.
Yes. So,
Sorry, when Kevin said see it again, I thought he meant see what the revisions are gonna be here again before. it goes
Oh,
on.
no.
But if
Nope.
we're just gonna make it and send it up.
No.
these two will go up, and then we're gonna continue on. So, the one thing that I did wanna talk about, I just wanna make sure on the subcommittee that we also don't lose sight of the fact of one of the reasons this came up was because of our POR zone, and some of these where there was pre-existing conditions. I don't wanna lose sight of that, because that is going to be a lot of discussion. So, if I could just ask that maybe that some of the next conversations that happen, there might be things under other areas that, you know what, adding it is one thing, but somebody that's stuck with something as a pre-existing, such as pavement or gravel, those kind of things, I think that is gonna take a little bit more discussion, and they aren't two separate conversations, but they kinda are, and I just don't wanna lose sight on that, because here we've started to open up the POR, there's a lot of people that wanna transform these properties, which is what we wanna encourage, but they're kinda strapped right now, and we're trying to see whether we should or should not. Like, there isn't any definitive answer on that, which is why we wanted that discussion to see, so if some of the next few discussions can be focused around that, specifically some of the issues that we know are happening in the POR.
Absolutely.
This was great, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Good work. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and we actually started talking about that subject as well. At
Yeah.
our last meeting, we kind of side-tailed.
All this was done in 1 hour.
I know, I'm pretty impressed, actually.
1 hour.
So Mike, when you send this up to council, you're gonna delineate it between decks and pools, so it's it's separated?
Kara gave me a nice markup
Yeah,
and
okay,
to make it more clear.
yes. User-friendly,
Yeah.
Yep.
And I said to Kara, you gonna do this? She goes, I just did it.
okay.
Make it simple for people like me.
Yeah.
All right, next item is that general affordable housing discussion that, I'm going to turn this over to Mayor Gallagher.
And yes, an update. So, as everybody should be aware, the DCA, Department of Community Affairs, came out with the projected numbers for every municipality back in November. And every municipality has until January 31st to take some action on those numbers. They either have to agree with the number, disagree with the number and provide their own number, or do nothing. If they do nothing, they begin to open themselves up for developers' remedy lawsuits. We were given numbers. Our numbers were 74 units on our prospective need, that's moving forward, and 103 on our present need. That's with what we have. So we had tasked our professionals. We formed a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee, and that was comprised of Lisa, Jason, Art Adair from the zoning board, Mike, Kevin, Colin, myself, and from council, Randy
Randy Pitts.
And we had been meeting since before November, before the numbers came out, to begin to wrap our heads around these numbers. So once the numbers came out, Mike Cole, who we designated as our affordable housing planner, was tasked with determining whether those numbers were accurate, and if they were, let us know, and if they were not, to let us know and provide us with some type of documentation that we could then challenge. Mike, along with our Affordable Housing Council attorney, ran through the numbers and did all of their analysis and discovered that the numbers are accurate based upon what we have. So last night at the Borough Council meeting, the council certified those numbers. Kevin, by tomorrow, this time tomorrow, has to send it, or no, actually the attorney has to send it, submit it to DCA.
Everything's been submitted to Chris and
Okay, good, all right. So there's a whole series of events that has to happen between now and June 30th. In short, other than the filings that have to be done, we now have to create a housing plan. That housing plan will then take those numbers, and what we will do is begin to apply some of the housing that we already have that may be compliant with either one of these present or future needs. And then that will adjust that number, up, down, sideways, or neutral, whatever it winds out to be, probably going down. So once that's done, we will then bring that back to the planning board for a, to tear it apart, chew it up, and then once we come up with a affordable housing plan that we feel is appropriate for Somerville, we then kick it up to council as a recommendation, and then council can take it, modify it, or approve it. Somerville, and I've said this before, Somerville has shouldered their responsibility of housing very well. About 10 years ago, we did a housing analysis, and that was done in conjunction with the planning board and the borough council. And we created we essentially just analyzed what we had from an existing housing stock. And as it turned out, we were more than compliant with affordable housing, but it was based on market forces. It wasn't based on dedicated homes, but it was through market forces. Well, obviously, since 15, the housing market has gone ballistic. And it's due to a number of factors, increased need. A lot of it is supply and demand. In the last 4 years, it's not political, but you've had 10 million people, additional people looking for housing in this country. And that has created an excessive demand, which has shrunk the supply and driven the costs way up. So that's just an economic fact. So, you know, a lot of people will complain in a lot of different communities about the cost of housing, and they're not wrong. It's out of hand. It really is. The numbers are just staggering. So our job is to figure out what then is appropriate for Somerville. And that's where we're at. So that's the update. Next steps are, once it has been submitted, once we get confirmation it's been submitted to DCA, we will then begin to reassemble the ad hoc committee, and we'll start putting that plan together. And you know, we've already begun creating the Affordable Housing Office, the trust fund. We had one of our developers provide a donation to that Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which we can then use not only for startup costs, but potentially down the road for rehab costs. And we'll move forward. But you know, my goal is to craft something that is appropriate for Somerville, not appropriate for Trenton, but appropriate for Somerville. So that's where we're at. Questions?
I just had one question.
Yeah.
The two numbers that you gave at the very beginning,
Yeah.
is that supposed to be, you know, you said what is existing and what our goal is?
No, one is a prior need, that's the 104. That's what they're
That's
saying
existing.
we're short right now.
Oh, they're saying we're short, okay.
Yeah, the state says we're short 104. 73 is or 74, sorry, 103 and 74.
74.
74 is the prospective need that they see based upon vacant land, based upon a number of different factors. Mike would be
Yeah,
better.
Larry, it's based on the past two census, what they're projecting the growth's gonna be. And based on the projected growth, they're saying to the borough has to provide on the future growth developments, 74 units.
So now, for example, so on our future need and/or our past need, so the senior citizens complex, for example, that is not calculated in that required number. So that will have an effect on what our required number is, driving it down. Now, it's not a one-for-one, because there's different formulas for different categories. You know, seniors, veterans, workforce, low income, moderate income, and they all have different, thank you, yeah, different weights. So that's where the plan begins to come in place. And then, you know, how do we integrate rehabilitation into it? And that's how we move forward. You know, rehab, my thoughts are seniors and veterans first. And you know, that's what I see as rehabilitation. That's just, you know, that's my opinion. We'll go through all of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It's a learning process for all of us. I don't think it's one that a lot of us wanted to do, but you know what? It's timely, and
It was an interesting conversation.
yeah, and it's appropriate.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I think every community is faced with this challenge now. You have these dynamic groups of folks, young folks, old folks, and you know, they can't afford to stay in their house, or they can't afford to stay in the town they want to stay in, or if they're on the other end of the spectrum, they can't afford to buy into the community they want to be in. Not everybody can be in every community they want to be in. You know, I want to be in, you know, Far Hills, but that's not going to happen. You know, it's a challenge, and we have to figure out how best to help Somerville shoulder some of that responsibility.
All right, I have no other comments. We will open up the meeting to the public for any comments. Hearing none, I'm going to close public. And I would like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All mics